Live. So we are live. Cool. Welcome back, guys. We are doing again the IP City. We did some seasons last year, and now we are focusing again with the topic that I'm passionate about, which is technology and startup cities. And today we have Rafael Castaneda as co-host with us, and a very special guest, Bradford Cross from Alpha City. He's an OG AI builder, 2 decades building AI companies and exiting companies. And now they are coming for building cities, rethinking the governance systems, economic systems for the internet, for the AI era. So I'm really excited to have this conversation and learn more what is coming and understand what is Alpha City about. Welcome, Rafa. Welcome, Bradford.
Thank you very much.
So do you want to say some words, Rafa?
Just, say good afternoon for whoever's here, or good night, good day, depending on where you're watching.
Yes.
It's my pleasure to be invited, Jean, to co-host this series of new casts with you. And I'm very happy to have our first guest here. Bradford surely is going to share with us some amazing knowledge about what he's been building, and I'm very eager to discuss the topics we are bringing here today. Let's do it.
Nice. Thanks for accepting co-hosting this with me. And I think, so before jumping into Alpha City, April, we will have the second edition of IP Village, which is Brazil's largest pop-up city. It's just a global community coming to Brazil, to Florianopolis, for 1 month to prototype governance solutions and rethink how we run cities. And this includes education, safety, how to use blockchains to reputations, passports, ID. And there's a bunch of innovation that most people don't know about this, including privacy, ZK, and these kind of things. And now on top of that, we have just amazing LLMs, AI, that we can leverage that to accelerate the update of our systems. So if you are interested, ip.city, you can learn more about that. But Bradford, do you wanna say more about your background? You worked 2 decades in the AI space? Do you wanna share a bit more about your history?
Yeah, sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Bradford Cross. My background was originally in computer science, but also I studied several other fields that were related, both technical and non-technical. So I did a lot in electrical engineering and other things like that because I was originally in a computer engineering course in or program in Virginia Tech, which is a mashup of computer science and electrical engineering. They do it the same way at Berkeley as well. And so I have a lot of experience in a variety of different technical areas around computing. I always built my own machines and everything growing up. Built a lot of like RC weird crafts and stuff that I would fly around and stuff as a kid. So I always have been, interested in this kind of thing, of autonomous systems and remote controlled systems and so on. So in school, I worked on a lot of that kind of stuff, but I also started to get into the business side. So I also was doing finance and econ and so on. And right out of school, I went into the hedge fund industry initially, actually, for a few years. I was building fully automated trading systems using machine learning in the very early 2000s. It was cool and I made money and it's fun, but I felt that it's detached from like reality and real impact. So it's a fun thing to do. Like I manage my own investments, right? I have a big crypto portfolio and a bunch of other stuff, but I don't super actively trade as a professional thing. I have some systems that I run for myself, and I may invite some other people to invest alongside me in some stuff at some point. But it's always been, ever since those first couple of years, more of a side thing. I was also a co-founding partner of DCVC, which has become like around a $5 billion deep tech and AI venture platform. We started with that back in 2011. So that was pretty early and really the first major VC dedicated towards AI and data. And then I also did Flightcaster in Y Combinator in 2009. That was the first AI startup in Y Combinator all the way back in 2009. So yeah, I was doing this stuff pretty early. I was also very blessed to have the opportunity to be at Google for a couple of years in 07 to 09. I think a lot of people don't remember how insane Google was in the early 2000s. They really had all the good people, because after the dot-com crash bottomed out in like 2002, they just hired everyone. So like all the best researchers and computer scientists were pretty much all working at Google. There was like really no number two. It was like Google and then a massive drop off, right? It was really incredible to be able to be there at the time. The talent level it was humbling. You know, I would work all day and I felt like a complete idiot compared to some of my colleagues. And I would go home and just keep studying and things all night. You'll, be in a technical discussion and you're like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. And then you go home like studying some stuff that you weren't familiar with. It was awesome. It feels great to have that kind of push, to get better. So I think that was a huge part of my formative career, and part of what led to a lot of my success was this exposure to such incredible genius and caliber of execution at Google in those years. So anyways, all the way back to 99 in undergrad, I already was thinking about AI and where it was going, and that this is what I wanted to do with my life. I told you since childhood, I had been always working on, building computers, building remote control devices of different kinds, and thinking about how could I automate things around the house. I would have little weird gadgets and stuff to do automatic things. I just always thought about it. And so, a lot of the stuff that's happening now is stuff that I've been thinking about for a very, very long time and kind of preparing myself for. So I think it's definitely a big advantage, because I'm able to think way ahead still, so people are kind of reacting to what's happening now. Whereas I've already shifted to working on redesigning civilization, right? Because I'm like, no, I don't think you guys realize how big this is. I'm redesigning civilization. I'm redesigning the concept of what a university is, and all kinds of other things, with the idea that, all our entire society is going to be turned upside down. And it already is getting turned upside down. And it's much, much, much more powerful than anything we've seen in the past, like the Industrial Revolution or whatever. It's going to be way different. In particular, when you combine what's happening with AI and with crypto, right? We forget it's for years, it's been this way. It keeps going back and forth, where like everybody gets, crypto goes way up, people get hyped up and they jump into crypto, and they don't know anything about it. They don't belong there. They're not serious about it in builders. And then of course, with the volatility that we see as crypto is going all the way to mainstream adoption, they bail out when the volatility hits on the downside. And where do they go? AI, right? And then when the AI cycle is down, which is invariably going to happen again, where are they going to go? They're going to go back to crypto. And so they keep just losing their money by trading out at the bottom of AI and crypto, right? And never really building like a meaningful career or investment portfolio. I think we're going to keep seeing this with so many people in tech, so many people in VC, where they don't have any real thoughts of their own or any real conviction to stick in these things for the long term and really build something of any enduring value. They're looking to trade, right? And I don't think people are going to make money really in trading these markets. I think you're going to make money holding long term and investing long term and building things long term. So I think that where we're at in AI right now is obviously extremely exciting. But I also think that the vast majority of people building stuff or investing in it are going to lose everything, to be honest, because they don't understand really the fundamental nature of what's going on. And really what it is that, you know, we, in a nutshell, we worked for a very long time on machine learning and more statistical learning stuff. The deep learning stuff wasn't really working. You know, neural nets were considered kind of crackpot stuff. And the handful of academics that really took it super seriously, like Jeff Hinton and all his students and that whole lineage, were kind of laughed at, to be honest, for a really long time, all the way through like really even like the late 2010s. Like they weren't really being taken seriously. You know, I was in the same bucket. Like I didn't really take this stuff seriously. You know, you had the Ray Kurzweil guy and the singularity, and we all used to laugh at that because it's like, this is so ridiculous, given where we're really at in the cycle of technological development with this stuff. We're so far away. And then all of a sudden, like they start to get really great results. Especially, I think, the ImageNet stuff, you know, back in the day that Ilya did and so on, like things started to really take off. Google didn't really take it seriously enough, which they should have. And it kind of got funded by Elon. A lot of people forget because of this OpenAI thing, but that was Elon, right? Like Elon put the money in. Elon is why Ilya went. It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for him. Like that's just the reality. He should be credited as the primary founder of the thing, to be honest. But then it was formatted in this weird way and so on, and now there's been all this drama around it, right? But the point is, it spawned up. So you now have OpenAI, you have Anthropic, you have Google with Gemini, and you have some Chinese guys. And like, this is where the majority of the economic outcomes will accrue in the near term to these massive platform companies. And there'll be some for imagery and stuff like that too. Like I use Midjourney all the time to do things, to generate stuff for our architecture team. But a lot of this stuff where people are going bonkers, like they think they're going to do a trivial wrapper around this stuff, and then it just gets obsoleted every 6 months, you know? Like I had a former chief of staff of mine who went to go do a legal tech startup. I told him, hey, I'm really concerned about the pace of development of the LLMs. And so I don't know if you want to build a big machine learning team internally and try to train your own custom legal LLM, which is what they tried to do. And then, of course, 6 months later, they were getting better results just prompting, you know, GPT and Claude directly. And so they had to end up doing a big layoff of technical staff and keeping just one person, right, and building directly on top of the platform. And I was like, that's what I'm saying. It's going to be very hard to compete with that core technology, right? But last thing I'll say about the AI stuff, the part I'm most excited about, and honestly that I've been involved in for many years, is like more the vertical AI and going out into other fields. I did a post about this in, I think it was 2017, that really blew up and had like millions of views. It was retweeted by, you know, all the top researchers and stuff. And basically the idea is that it's really going to be AI stacked with another scientific vertical and business vertical that ends up creating the most crazy, groundbreaking stuff. What we're seeing right now, we're seeing it because we have this data from the internet, right? So we have a ton of text data, a ton of image and video data, and therefore we're very good at text, images, and videos, right? The machine learning techniques and the way that we train the models is ready to go for any domain that has that kind of data. But we don't have it in other domains. We only have it for those 3 domains. So, well, how do you generate it for biology, material science, physics, chemistry, and all these other domains? Well, you generate it with robotics. So what we're going to start to see is massive, massive robotic research labs, like cloud labs, let's call them, right? Where the AI directs experiments, and it comes up and says, hey, we want to create a new composite for battery tech, a new kind of a material, right, that we need inside solid state batteries. And so we have our spec, We have the objective function, how it needs to perform, and we come up with a big batch of experiments. We submit it to the cloud. The cloud runs the experiments, gets the output, gives it back to the AI. The AI says, okay, here's the next batch of experiments. And it keeps going until it maximizes the objective function in a way that solves for whatever constraints researchers have put on the system to say, yeah, this is a potentially successful material. We need to make some pilot amount of this and really try it now. That's what we're going to see in every domain. So one of the coolest things in AI that I'm working on, the main thing, is this AI university, where we totally change the way that the educational model works at the university level, where basically, if you imagine a normal four-year undergrad program, the first 2 years is just computing for everyone. No matter if you're going out into bio or medicine or chemistry or whatever, you start with computing. And then after that, after you have a solid foundation, then you go out into your domain. So then you go out into chemistry, into bio, whatever. But you're starting with a really strong, deep foundation of the fundamentals to be able to use modern tools, right? And then because basically the argument is like, this stuff is like English and math, or like these basic, reading, writing, mathematics, basic stuff that you would have in grade school. We should be doing that with computing now, but we're not, because people are taking a while to catch up, right? So we're saying, hey, we're going to catch everyone up in those first 2 years, make sure they have those fundamentals. And then they're going to go out into their vertical major. And with each major, they'll have an attached massive research lab, like robotics research lab that they can work with, because that's how research happens in the modern and future world. You don't go into a lab with test tubes and a pipette and move stuff around. That's not going to happen ever again. This doesn't make any sense. Everything is going to be done with robotics at enormous scale, right? So, well, you need to understand how to control those robots. You need to understand how to work with computing, because that's how science is going to happen. That's how it's already happening, and it's only going to accelerate. And the AI itself, for the first few years and throughout the entire program, will be a completely new type of teacher. Like, we're completely rewriting how pedagogy works. So you shouldn't really be doing these static, homework assignments and static exams and so on. It doesn't really make sense. You should be trained like we train the AI, right? This is the biggest thing that I've been thinking about for many years that worries me the most when people talk about the Terminator type scenario, this Armageddon type scenario, or a Matrix or whatever, where we're like enslaved by the machines, right? Well, if we're so worried about this, then why do we keep training the AI models in a billion times better way than we train our own brains? Like, why? It's obvious that it's outpacing us dramatically, and yet we keep with the same static educational model that we've had for, thousands of years. The oldest university that's continuously running in the world is University of Bologna in Italy, and it's over 1,000 years old, something like that. It's around 1,000 years. And so we're still teaching the same way that they were teaching 1,000 years ago. But then the AI models were teaching with these super crazy advanced ways, and we keep every year inventing a whole bunch more techniques on how to train them more efficiently. That's the thing that's moving the fastest at this point. More so than the neural net architecture itself, the thing that's moving the fastest is how do we train these things? And so, but we're not moving fast with how we train our own brains, and that should be our primary concern, right? Why aren't we doing this with ourselves? And so our answer is, let's do it. Let's train our humans like we train AI. So I'm gonna give you one problem at a time. And then you try to solve it. If you don't give me back the correct problem, the answer, I give it to you again and again and again until you finally get it right. Then, based on the path I'm trying to take you down and everything I know about you and all the problems you've submitted to me so far, on a personalized basis, I give you the next problem you should solve. And I keep walking you down that way. And same with projects. When I'm giving you projects, we do it the same way. One kid might finish a class in 6 weeks. Another kid might finish a class in 6 months. I don't care. I care about the performance and the outcome and the level that I need to get them to. The way that the legacy education model is, I call it boot camp for the mind. It's kind of like everyone goes in, they go through the same things, and but the point is not to build with boot camp, it's like you're breaking people down and you're building camaraderie and all this stuff. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to educate people. It's a totally different thing. So why are our academic programs looking like boot camp for the mind? Why aren't they looking highly personalized and tailored and stuff? I get why we didn't do it historically, because then we would have had to have one-on-one tutoring for everybody. But now we can do one-on-one tutoring for everybody with AI, and we should be, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, that's the last thing I'll say, because I could talk about this topic forever.
We could hear this for hours as well. So you mentioned that during your time in Google, it was like humbling. That's the same sentiment that I have. Like when I was in Singapore and talked to all these people building startup societies, and like, oh my gosh, what I'm doing here. But it's funny because you learn so much. I learned so much from you as well, just observing what you are doing, and you like makes you try to evolve and be bolder, actually, like and
Right.
and apply these technologies, because you have so much power. Like just 2 or 3 years ago, the amount of things that you can do is like 10x. So if like even the documentary that I did with just a small budget, it was not possible without AI. So we use a lot of AI to the audio, voice editing, and I think we need to update our mental models to thrive for bigger things. And talking about education, so I'm really curious about how this tech mindset or these startups are going to innovate in all the governance and institutions, because as you said, we saw that with crypto in finance, monetary system, and a bit of media. Yeah, we have like an explosion of social media and all kind of things. Before it was like just mainstream media, and you just gave us an example of education. Education is completely obsolete. It's completely obsolete. And that said, I want to hear like what is Alpha City and how are you thinking about the cities of the future?
Yeah,
and applying these technologies for this new realm that is new for most people.
Yeah, so I'll talk about Alpha in a second. I want to address one thing first, because I didn't really touch on it initially and you just did. So, and that's my views about crypto. So I consider myself like a OG, like classical crypto guy. Like the reason I love it is because I despise the current nation state and its model. I despise the lack of service to the people and the corruption, the self-dealing, and I despise especially the control of money supply and interest rates by the state and the fractional reserve banking model. It needs to be terminated forever. It's very important that we literally kill this forever and remove these people from power. They should not have the levers to be doing this stuff. It should be market dynamics, right? It's very, very important to me. And I think anyone who understands classical liberalism and all these great economists like von Mises and everyone, right? You go and read all the stuff I did in college. You can't help but be aligned with crypto in a very fundamental way, right? But I think that we lost our fight and lost our North Star a little bit along the way, multiple times. And the most recent one was this Web3 stuff, right? And it's like, I mean, not to diss anyone if they're doing a cool project or whatever, that's cool. But like, honestly, I don't care. Like, that's not what we were trying to do. We're trying to reinvent the nation state. So it's like, what's the killer app for crypto? And most people right now, they're saying it's stables, right? And that pisses me off. The killer app for crypto is payments. It's simply payments. It's just paying money to someone. Getting rid of the legacy money is the whole point, right? So like I should be able to go into any store and pay with whatever, high liquidity tokens I have that I want to pay with. And it should be able to auto convert into whatever they want to receive. And it should be very simple. And we should be able to do this everywhere, all over the world. Like that is the most basic thing, because that's how you get rid of that aspect of money, right? The medium of exchange aspect. That's the very important and most important thing, right? And for me, what I was thinking is we would start to build the layers of a new civilization on top of this first layer, like crypto being the first layer, right? Replace money supply and interest rate control of the nation state with a new market-based model, and then start building layer and layer and layer on top of it, right? But we have to have the courage to push through and actually execute that first step. We need jurisdictions where that happens, right? So first and foremost, when you think about alpha, I'm thinking that way, right? I think that AI and crypto are these very fundamental technologies that we should build future civilization on top of. And so, it's crypto only in all our cities. There'll be no fiat ever in there. You won't even be able to use a credit card anymore. It's not going to be supported, you just have a wallet and that's it. And if you want to come into the city and you don't have any crypto, welcome to crypto, right? Here's it, you can stick your credit card into the wallet and it'll charge you, and you'll have some crypto, and you can start buying stuff with crypto. We'll onboard you, right? But that's how it's all going to work from the ground up. And I thought we would see other ideas by now that could be building blocks, like the stuff with DAOs. Just nothing really that spectacular has happened, even though it looks really cool and it should have happened. We don't see it, right? So I think a lot about these kind of building blocks and how they should be part of what we do, right? So in terms of like what is alpha, it's really a fully reimagined human civilization, starting from the ground up with these technology primitives at the core. And also with two very important ideas that need to be integrated in order for society to function better. One is classical liberalism, and the other one is social liberalism. I think one of the most unfortunate parts about modern geopolitics is people don't seem to understand that these two things can coexist just fine, right? You can have a capitalist society that's classically liberal, and you can also have a strong degree of empathy and care for your fellow humans, right? And in fact, in a rich society like we have in many Western countries, you should be able to do that. So ideas like free healthcare, free education, even UBI, these are ideas that I very, very much support, and that are financially achievable today in many Western countries if we just cut all the bullshit out of the government that we spend money on and basically line the pockets of like, oh, here's a senator and their cousin has, some consulting company, and they're the ones actually, so much of this kind of crap is happening at the national level, at the state level, and at the municipal level in the United States, as an example, that the money just disappears, right? And so as far as that goes, when it comes to systems thinking, why does it disappear? Well, because taxation isn't a good revenue model. It creates this one mega slush fund, and then the tax revenue has to get propagated out to all these other departments, right? And so every time you put a person in between the money and where it needs to be spent, now you have an opportunity for grift, corruption, and all this bad stuff, right? And everyone's going to line their pockets. Everybody's cousin is going to have a consulting company, right? And it's just going to go on and on and on endlessly. Right, we have to be more decentralized and pay for services, right? So in Alpha, we plan on having a zero taxation model permanently, and everything is going to be paid services that the government runs. So if when you're registering companies or you're doing other things or you're processing transactions that needs to have some kind of an AML check, and there's a central registry from the state, that's how we make our money. We make our money as SaaS, not with taxation, right? And this has kind of already been tried in Dubai. That's how it worked for a very long time, right? It was pay for services. It was no tax, but you pay for education and so on. That's how it should be. And then with the surplus of revenue you have, then you provide a free tier of service, right? So anyone who considers themselves hardcore libertarian or hardcore capitalist or whatever, have you ever heard one of them accuse a SaaS company of being communist for having a free tier? No, right? Because we know why they have a free tier, right? It's in their self-interest to have a free tier. They're trying to onboard people. And then once you like the software and you use it and you're successful with it, it's adding value to you. Now you start moving up into the paid tiers and higher and paying more and more money. It's the same for the state, right? So like if somebody is, starting from a low economic basis and they're availing themselves of free healthcare and education and UBI or whatever, it's a very cynical attitude to think that, human beings are just inherently exploitative and want to exploit that, right? Some people do, but a lot of it is because of how we've set the systems up. Humans are not as clever as we think we are. We're a lot closer to rats in a maze, like hunting for the cheese than we think, right? So you set up the maze and you set it up in a certain way, the rat's gonna find the cheese. That's how it works, right? And it's the same with us. If you set up a crappy system that is exploitable for this type of stuff, then the rat is gonna find the cheese, right? People are going to exploit it. But if you set it up in a way that has accountability and clarity and all these other things so that it can't really be exploited in that way, then you won't really have these kinds of problems. If you look at all the stuff blowing up in the US lately around all the fraud and stuff, there's no measurement, there's no accountability, right? You just, here's $7 million for a daycare. And then there's no accountability, there's no check-in, there's no digital record keeping, there's nothing. I mean, of course you're gonna have corruption and grift in an environment like that, right? Humans are set up to optimize for the environment that you drop us into and optimize for our whatever the reward function is, right? And in modern society, the reward function is largely money. And so if you drop us into a system where that's the easiest way to get a bunch of money, you can't assume that people are going to use some kind of a mythical moral compass to avoid doing that. It's not, you can't rely on that, right? So you can't vilify these people and say, they have bad values. That's why they're doing that stuff. Because it assumes like that we're these perfect creatures that should be able to do all this. It's not true. Like we're animals, right? We're apes that are a little bit smarter and have no hair. That's what we are. Right. And so like, let's just be honest about it and set up systems that work to avoid this type of grift. Right. And so if you think about building the whole government from the ground up and it's all digital, it's all trackable, you don't have all this money disappearing off into nowhere. You're not taxing people and putting the money down a hierarchy of 10 different steps until it gets to the person who spends it. But the money is flowing directly into the entities that need to use it. And they have to be profitable. Right. So it's like if you're running the educational system and you have like paid tiers of education and free tiers of education, I'm not subsidizing you. Your educational department is profitable on its own. Right. And if it's not, then I'm firing you and hiring a new CEO of it. Right. And that's the other part that's different with how Alpha is structured and how I think about the future of civilization. I think that the two systems that have scaled the best so far in the history of mankind is number one, the internet, and number two, companies, corporations. And so, we should be looking to those two models to inspire us a lot more about how we design the future of governance and not as much into how, this past couple hundred years of Western democracy. I think people are way too obsessed about it and it's leading to a lot of problems. And it's like arguably my granddad, John Adams, the second president, he was the author of the Massachusetts Constitution, which is a huge input, if not the primary input, into the US Constitution. So this is my own family's work that I'm talking about, right? But if I were to be able to, bring John Adams to sit next to us right now and explain to him what we're doing and how we're doing the same thing that they were doing back in the day, I think he would be like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, why haven't you evolved and done anything new? Like, this is crazy. All you've done is a couple of small interpretations of, the fact that when we say freedom applies to everyone, it means all races and both men and women. Like, that's basically the only thing you figured out in like a few hundred years. Come on, guys. Like, I don't think people would have intended for it to be this way. I think it's pretty messed up how far behind we are, and the fact that this is treated as this like sacred cow that nobody can touch and nobody can question, right? We have to look at it and say, the point is to have the will of the people, be governance by the will of the people, and to not have feudalism, right? And to not have authoritarianism. Yes, that's right. We want that, right? But we want it to function. So, arguably corporations kind of have this in a way, because you have the CEO and their shareholders can vote to push out the CEO. The shareholders and the board are actually kind of in control technically, right? And so that works a lot better, because then the CEO is elected once and they're empowered with the authority to do everything. And they have total control of the organization. They can hire and fire anyone they want. They can restructure everything they want. They don't have to go and seek votes for all this lower down stuff, right? That's not required. There's certain checks and balances, like certain executives and stuff need board approval. Certain financings and matters like this require board approval. So there's governance around certain decisions that the CEO makes, but otherwise it's assumed that they're empowered to do everything themselves. I think that's a way better model. I think if you look at a lot of what's wrong in modern democracy, there's way too much bureaucracy. And there's this idea that everybody should have a say in everything all the way up and down the stack. And some places like in California, people can vote for really tiny minutia in like the cities, right? At the city level, at the municipal level, people are able to vote on these tiny little why? They shouldn't be able to vote for anything except for who the mayor is. Just vote for the mayor. And same with there's city supervisors and all these other roles. That I just don't agree with any of this. Vote for the mayor, and that's your guy. And then the mayor can hire and fire and restructure the government and do whatever they want. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to have the ability to change anything, right? Everything is ossified and calcified and just stuck, right? Because every tiny little thing needs to go back out to get voted on by the populace. It's like, how are you ever going to get anything done like that? Imagine you were running a company like that, and every decision you try to make, you have to go out to all of your employees and they all vote. That's crazy. Even if you did that all with like modern crypto type stuff, as the primitives, it's still crazy, but doing it because it's just, socially it's crazy, and it's bad decision making. You get groupthink, analysis paralysis, and all this other bad stuff. So I think the point of Alpha is to design the entirety of civilization from the ground up, not just based on what we see is not working in the West. So far, I've talked about what's mostly not working in the West, but also what's not working in the developing world, right? Because the developing world is much worse off, right? What happened in the West is the West got rich, and then now it's been in this analysis paralysis, like drift to and from socialism and stuff for a while. It's kind of a mess. But the reality is the rest is mostly rich. It's people are okay. Of course, there's struggles and everything, but when you compare it to the rest of the world, it's okay, right? A lot of places, Africa in particular is very, very bad off, and many places in Latin America and Asia have been pretty bad off. And so, how do we address the challenges that are holding the developing world back from basically developing their economies a lot faster? And you have to go and look at colonialism and what happened under colonialism and directly afterwards, and why have a lot of these systems been left the way they are and never really evolved to function well. I love Hernando de Soto, if you guys know him. He's amazing. His book, The Mystery of Capital, is really the best book, I think, that describes why the developing world is not developing economically as fast as it should be. I highly encourage anyone who cares about these topics to go and read that one. But basically, the same systems that we need to design for the West to function better are the same systems that we need to design to lift the developing world up, right? So the way that Alpha looks at this is simple. Like, number one, we can't change the West. The West is like the West is like a family member who has a drug addiction, and they have to hit rock bottom and be willing to change, right? It's like you can't force them into rehab and force them into all these. They gotta hit rock bottom and recognize it on their own. So I'm not one of these guys that wants to try to force change in the West. Many people are trying to do that. Good on them. I think we need a bunch of different experiments, of course, because I may be wrong. Maybe some people are able to do some radical turnaround in the US or some of the countries in Europe or whatever. I wouldn't have guessed this huge pivot away from socialist tendencies in Latin America that we've seen in recent years. I think that's absolutely fabulous. Seeing with what's happening in Argentina, El Salvador, now in Chile, it's a wave maybe. So I hope for you guys, like we talked about before we started, I hope that we see this in Brazil, because Brazil needs it incredibly bad. The bureaucracy and nonsense in Brazil makes it impossible to get anything done, right? So it's super badly needed in Brazil after decades of that type of thinking, right? So that's very important that we move away from this stuff, and people who are going to fight that fight, awesome. Like, somebody needs to do it. But for me, because I'm also interested in these technological primitives and the fact that socialism is a very bad idea, and we already know that for a long time. And so convincing a lot of people that socialism is a bad idea and just to do capitalism, for me, it's already obsolete, right? It's like you're on the Titanic, right? And you're basically arguing about something that is irrelevant because the ship is sinking. That's kind of what it is, right? Yeah, getting rid of socialism is great, but the entire way that we've designed civilization is not ready for what's coming in the next 20 years. Like, we need a bigger redesign. And so where can we do that? Well, we can only do it in the developing world, in countries that need to bring people in to accelerate its economic development. I can't convince people in the US or Brazil or these big, powerful countries in Europe to do crazy radical ideas and tell them, hey, like, the way we're doing everything is all wrong. Let's build a special economic zone and just do radical new experimentation. They're just going to be like, no way. But if you go to Africa, or you go to the less developed countries in Latin America, or the less developed countries in Asia, or the less developed countries in Eastern Europe and the Balkans and stuff, you can start to see way more willingness to try new ideas, right? And so what's the Alpha is kind of a dual level mission where we're attacking what's wrong in the West and what's wrong in the developing world at once, with a new kind of a foundation that works to fix the issues in the developing world so that they can grow a lot faster. And then as we have these cities going, we'll use them as case study cities, and we'll bring people through from the developed world and say, hey, check this out. We could do the same thing in your country, right? And my hope is to have this ready by the time that the addict hits rock bottom, right? So it's like, addict hits rock bottom, they're finally ready to listen, and we are already 15, 20 years deep, and we say, hey, here's something that's halfway to Singapore that used to be a jungle, right? Come visit, come walk through, see how we've done this. We have all these documentaries, there's a docu-series about how this has evolved year over year since we started doing it, right? Come and learn. We want to share this. We want to see the developed world also implement these ideas and come into the future with us, right? Yeah. So my thinking is we build the future in the developing world, because that's where you have the freedom to do it. And then you can backport it to the developed world once people are more ready for these bigger new ideas, right? And then last thing, really quick in a nutshell about Alpha, how do we approach it? It's actually pretty simple. So we come into a country, we do an economic analysis. What are the resources that they have? Basically, what are their assets? What do they have going for them? What are their strategic advantages? And then we outline an industrial master plan. Like, what are the industries that should be there? If it's a small island and it doesn't have any physical resources, but it's easier to get bigger things done with the central bank faster. Let's make an offshore financial center there, like a crypto financial center, right? Because I can do really innovative stuff that I couldn't do in a bigger country. Even a bigger country in Africa, like Nigeria or Kenya, I couldn't do some of the things I can do on the small islands off the coast of West and East Africa, because it's just I can work with the central bank in a different way, right? So that's an asset, like their sovereignty and their ability to do something that other people couldn't do with their financial system. That's an asset. They may not have necessarily seen it as an asset before I showed up, but that's an asset. It's actually their most valuable asset, in fact. And I think some other countries, they have like Angola, where we're doing stuff on the Lobito corridor. It's on the stretch of the richest critical mineral belt in Africa, one of the most strategic places on earth. The minerals are all coming from central southern Africa out into Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and hopefully soon out into the port of Lobito in Angola. We want to build big EV cities at those two endpoints, because one of Africa's big problems is that, of course, it just exports all the raw materials, right? And it doesn't really build any of the downstream industry. So you don't have accrual of all that value in country. That's something Brazil has done well. Like when I came to tour all the coffee and cacao farms, like the big organic ones, because that's something we did recently since it's relevant for our businesses in Africa. We will have a large agricultural arm to the company because, of course, agriculture is the best way to create huge number of jobs and lift people from poverty the fastest. There's no way to lift people from poverty as fast as a really good agricultural ecosystem and getting people from subsistence ag to high quality export ag. And Brazil has gone through that already. And one of the coolest things that was a surprise to me when I was touring the farms and you see all of the machinery is so much of it is Brazilian. I was expecting, when you see all the optical sorters and all these other things, I was expecting to see that it's all German and Japanese and everything else, but that's not the case at all. There's a ton of top tier Brazilian engineering companies making a ton of this machinery. And I was like, that's amazing, right? So Brazil is doing it. Brazil for decades has been moving along the stack, right? Brazil would be probably a top 3 economy if it wasn't for all the socialist scumbags that you guys have had to deal with for decades. If you just had a normal, more capitalist setup the whole time, I mean, it would probably be top 3 country by GDP, I bet. Just with all the resources you guys have and the brain power and the technology, it's extremely sad how much it's been held back by these idiots, right? It's been a huge issue.
Bradford, I think we got a good grasp at your vision for Alpha City. It's really exciting. I also have been following other projects with a similar approach, like let's reinvent civilizatory infrastructure, let's rebuild socio-economical foundations. I agree with you that people will respond to the current socio-economic incentives. So rats on the maize, if you put the cheese towards corruption, people will become corrupt. I also agree that you can have capitalistic societies that have something like at least some degree of universal healthcare or UBI or some kind of social care. My questions, and I would like your view on that, really curious about your thoughts on that, is that if we set up some experiments in the idea of Alpha City and they start to prosper, and it is possible to do some level of free healthcare or at least a level of UBI, how would you deal with the issue of like I don't like to use this word, but immigration? Like, how can we set up, because we cannot have like an infinite amount number of citizens, because we have to scale things and plan things. Resources, even if money can become infinite, resources are not infinite. So if you have thought about that, how could we tackle this issue that if we come up with a good solution for a startup city or a network state, how should we deal if it becomes so successful that we have a huge amount of inflow of solicitations and more people wanting to become citizens?
Yeah, great, very good question. So I was just watching a video from Milton Friedman, who's my partner at Pronomos' granddad, actually. And he was talking about how, the welfare state is incompatible with free immigration. If you have a ruthlessly competitive society with nothing will be free, nothing will be provided by the state, then people won't go there unless they know that they can compete and do something for themselves, right?
Yeah.
We don't really have this problem of people coming to exploit. And I think that's a fair point. But I think there's a way to elevate the immigration discussion to be far more strategic. I think, it's a strategic problem for the country's economic development. I think of everything from an economic development lens only. I think that's the best way to get to the brutal truth of things, right? So the US, when it had a very open immigration policy, it made sense because we had acquired this enormous territory and we needed so many people to come. So even if some of them were criminals or some of them were lazy or whatever, we just needed a ton of people to come. It was a problem of way too much land and way too many assets and way too few people. So this whole give us your poor, you're sick, you're weary, whatever, it wasn't altruistic. That's bullshit. It was practical, right? We needed that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because I think in modern immigration, we need to be thinking the same way. What do we need? So if I'm in an African country and it's pretty poor, and we get a city going that has, let's say, 20,000 people, but it's in a country of 20 million people. And now all of a sudden people are like, yeah, we want to go to this city, right? We want to grow the city and have a larger metro, and we want other people to move here from other countries in Africa. We want, of course everyone's going to want to come, but I think it should be restricted to high talent people who can create wealth and create jobs, right? Because that country already has 20 million people. What percentage of those people are already living in poverty and doing subsistence agriculture and stuff? Probably 75% of them, right? Just on African averages. So are we going to let people come from neighboring countries that also have no skill and no jobs and so on, and they're going to come and do these agricultural jobs? Absolutely not. We should strive to hit full employment with our own population within that country first and make them well off, right? And then you start to look to other populations.
I think that because that aligns perfectly with something that you just said, is that let's think more in terms like companies operate.
Yes.
So companies don't employ anyone.
No.
Companies employ people that they need to function. So it aligns perfectly.
Yeah. It's like, what are the roles that we need? 100%, man. Like, what are the roles? And the failure to do that is what is creating so many problems with immigration today, right? Like in the US, for example, we need lower cost labor from Latin America and especially Mexico. Our agricultural ecosystem would not function without it, right? Period. But it could have been done in a way that was much more legitimized and cleaner and better for the folks coming in and better for the country, right? And then now it's flip-flopping. Like even my own barber, he's a Mexican guy with a family that came in illegally, worked in the agricultural industry, worked their way up, put their son to school, and now he's going off and making a better life. And he was supposed to have the ability to grandfather his parents in once he turned 21 so that they could become US citizens. Now that's no longer possible because of some changes. Well, I think that's really fucked up, because that's exactly the kind of people that we needed and want in the US. And that families is like, these are just salt of the earth, God-fearing, top quality people coming in, working hard, building their family, trying to make a better life. That's the point. That's what we want. To not allow those people to become US citizens, it's a disgrace to what this country is supposed to be all about, right? And the fact that we're getting that wrong while we're letting in tons of criminals and random new people that basically are quote unquote refugees, it's a disaster. And the same is happening in Europe, where again, they're not thinking like a company. There's no leadership that's being savvy, and they're letting in these quote unquote refugees from North Africa. And of course, what's happening? They're raping people, they're stabbing people, they're acting crazy. you know, they're coming from these really fundamentalist, old school societies that even the Arabs have been warning the Europeans for a long time not to let them in, right? Why doesn't the UAE let all these refugees in, right? Because they know what they're doing. They're not letting these guys in. They know that they're a problem, right? They're one of the biggest problems in the world, actually, is like these extremists, you know, that are going into Europe. Like they were kind of boxed in over there to North Africa and certain Middle Eastern countries for a while. And I think it was better to kind of box them in and to try to deal with it. It's like a street smarts thing, right? It's like a queers for Palestine thing, right? Where you're like, guys, like, don't you realize if you go over there, they're just going to kill you? Like,
Yes.
It's like, how are you pro Hamas? Like, what is wrong with you? And it's just like, it's an utter lack of street smarts. I don't necessarily agree with everything in the Israeli military campaign strategy that we've seen recently. I think a lot of people would have issues with some of these things, but to then go and say that as a gay person, you're going to support Hamas because you don't like to see videos of kids carried out of rubble buildings. It's like, you're not thinking, man. You don't have any street smarts. You're not being worldly and wise about this. You're just being emotional and making bad decisions and aligning yourself with bad ideologies. And I think that's a lot of what we see with the altruism-based attempts at immigration, right? Where they're just like, come in because we want you to have a safe harbor and all this stuff. A lot of these people aren't really refugees per se. It's just like they're taking advantage of the system, and they're not necessarily people that have values that are aligned with what your society is set up to do. And then there's no reason that you need them there, right? Like, Europe has a problem with demographics. It does have an aging demographic. So the idea of Europe sitting there and strategically saying, hey guys, we're not making enough babies. We need to have some kind of a strategy here to increase the younger population. Like, how can we deal with this? What can we do, right? I mean, they've never let Turkey into the EU. Turkey has a huge population of younger folks that are way closer to European aligned. And they never did anything smart about this the whole entire time. They could have easily come up with a strategy to let Turkey into the EU and to start having more of the young Turkish folks coming in. And there's a ton of really well-educated folks, smart engineers and everything. Egypt also has a ton of really smart technical folks. There's a lot of like younger, able people that are really educated and really smart and ready to work that Europe could have let in, that would have helped it to solve its demographic challenges and to help it start to become more innovative, because it's so stagnant in Europe. But instead of like thinking strategically like that, it's this weird fake altruist type stuff that ends up causing all these problems, right? So yeah, you want to think immigrant people are just another resource, right? It's kind of maybe seems dehumanizing to say that. I don't mean it in a dehumanizing way. I'm just saying it's an economic resource. So you got to optimize your resources, right? And you want to bring in the right kinds of people for what you actually need.
Wow. Thanks a lot for the insights, Bradford. Jean, I think we should ask Bradford, perhaps for the audience, if anyone wants to like join Bradford, know more about Alpha City as we come towards the closure of interview, how people could get in touch, perhaps.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I want to respect Bradford's time. So just if people want to follow the Alpha City work, they should go to which place?
I think the best is to just go to our socials, because you can find everything from there. It's just alphacity.io online, and then it's the same on all the social networks, basically.
Right, I'm setting up the Twitter
Amazing.
here. So if anyone wants to get in touch, know more about Alpha City.
Oh, it's Alpha City Inc. on X, actually, sorry.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
I got your.
Okay, you got the right one.
All
Okay,
of your
good.
links right now. Yeah, so
We're
check their.
It's very primitive right now, but we'll start to have a lot more stuff coming out this year. It was just like we did things a little bit differently than the other network state stuff in the sense that I wanted to get deals with governments because of the degree of innovation that I care about down at the infrastructure level. And so we've done it a little bit differently. Instead of doing all the pop-up cities and all this type of stuff and then trying to go find something, we've started by trying to find places that we can set up as containers for this first. So the first 2 years was deep stealth. So that's why you don't see that much yet. This is the first year that we're starting to make public announcements and really talk about it more.
Great. Count on us to help spread the word, Bradford. Also count on us if you want to exchange any ideas. I am the founder of Volocracy, which is a non-chain governance system for network startups. Jean has a lot of experience with IP. We would help to contribute in any way that we can to help your project go further. I was very happy to know more about Alpha City. Hope you get on hands and grow and grow and grow, and we can come get you back here to tell you about some exciting news that are going to arrive soon. It was a pleasure for me getting to know more about you. I really appreciate your thoughts, the way you see things. You contributed a lot for me personally. So thanks a lot. And Jean, it's up to you, man.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. I'm really excited. That's why I'm building IP. It's to bring this innovation, these minds to Brazil. So we are hosting IP Village in April from 6th to May 1st. On the 10th and 11th, we have a conference. So the idea is bring more projects like Alpha City to Brazil and showcase the amount of innovation behind these projects, crypto, AI, startup society, startup cities. So most people in Brazil are they are too stuck into the political drama. They don't see the alternatives, and we want to present something that is growing a lot faster and honestly has more impact over the long term. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Bradford. Hope to see you soon.
Let me say one goodbye message to from a Brazilian perspective. So first of all, next time we talk, maybe we can do it in Portuguese because I'm learning it right now.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, because all of our first countries in Africa are Lusophone African countries. So we're starting in the Portuguese-speaking countries, in fact. And one very interesting thing I think that everyone should be thinking about in Brazil is, first of all, Brazil needs a lot of startup cities. I think it's a great country to do this, right? So I'm super excited what you guys are doing. I've already been looking at many different projects, and I personally would love to come do something in Brazil. I think that would be awesome. And then number two, Brazil needs to step into the lead role for the Lusophone countries worldwide, right? It's not Portugal anymore. It's too small. It's too poor. It doesn't really have much technology or interesting stuff to do, honestly. And all of Lusophone Africa is sitting there there's an enormous amount of land, enormous population, and an enormous desire to bring the technology and skills and everything that Brazil is farther ahead on, right? If you take Angola and Mozambique alone, the agricultural ecosystems are completely dead compared to even what they used to be, right? Just simply rolling out Brazil's ag ecosystem and technology in those two countries would radically change the countries forever, right? So I really would encourage everyone who cares about this stuff and thinks about it to think about not just startup cities within Brazil, but to think about startup cities throughout the Lusophone world and how much Brazil has to share with Lusophone Africa, because I think it's really enormous.
Great. Amazing words. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.